My name is William Miller Sr. I am 59 years old. I have 3 children and 7 grandchildren. I live at 142 Oak Street. These are the facts I hold on to, the coordinates of a life I'm no longer sure I'm living. For 30 years, my wife Mildred has started her day with the smell of coffee. For the last 10, I have started mine with the taste of dust and the echo of a scream. I was a sergeant in the United States Army. I was a good soldier. I followed orders and I kept my men safe. That was the mission. I failed. The war is a ghost that sits at our dinner table. Mildred and my daughter Lillian have learned to live with it. They speak in softer tones. They don't ask about the long hours I spend staring at the wall in my study, and they pretend not to notice when a car backfires down the street and my hand instinctively clenches into a fist. They are good people, caught in the blast radius of a bomb that went off a decade ago and half a world away. My pain is a tenant in our home that never pays rent, but takes up all the space. I see the toll it takes on them, the worry etched around Mildred's eyes, the way Lillian, even at 19, still speaks to me with a hesitant caution, as if I might break. I've tried everything. The VA therapists with their gentle questions and useless pamphlets. The support groups where men twice my size wept openly. A display of vulnerability I found both baffling and contemptible. Discipline is the only thing I have ever trusted. You do not talk about the wound, you patch it. You override the pain and you complete the mission. But this wound won't patch. At night, I am back on that rooftop in Fallujah. The sun a merciless hammer, the air thick with smoke. I hear David's voice, cracking a terrible joke, and then I hear the shot, and I feel the sickening final weight of his body against mine. Last week, I was scrolling through the news on my tablet, another sleepless night, when I saw it, an advertisement, nestled between articles about geopolitical tensions and economic forecasts. Aeternum Clinic. The ad was sleek, minimalist, a serene blue background with clean white text. The past is a place. You don't have to live there anymore. It promised a revolutionary new procedure, a non-invasive treatment to resolve traumatic memory. It wasn't therapy, it was an extraction, a clean, precise surgical solution. It was the kind of mission I understood. No talking, no weeping, just an objective and an asset to neutralize it. A way to patch the wound for good. For them. For Mildred and Lillian. A way to finally come home. I didn't tell Mildred where I was going. I just said I had an appointment, a new specialist the VA had recommended. The lie tasted like ash, but it was a tactical necessity. The Aeternum Clinic wasn't in a sterile medical park. It was in a discreet, high-end suburban office building, nestled between the offices of wealth managers and cosmetic surgeons. The waiting room smelled of lemon and something faintly metallic, like new circuit boards. It was silent, calming, and deeply unsettling. The doctor was a man whose calm, tailored suit was a kind of armor. He explained the procedure with smooth corporate reassurances. "We don't erase the memory, Sergeant Miller," he said, calling me by a title I hadn't used in years. We simply decouple the emotional charge from the neurological event. The data remains, but the pain is resolved. You will have peace. The procedure itself was anticlimactic. I sat in a comfortable reclining chair, much like a dentist's. A soft, humming hemisphere was lowered over my head. There were no needles, no pain, just a gentle warmth and a series of soft, pulsing lights behind my closed eyelids. I focused on the objective, the rooftop. I let the memory rise. The sun, the smoke, David's face. And then I felt a strange, painless sensation of detachment, like a surgeon lifting an organ from a body. The image flickered, and the terrible, crushing weight in my chest lifted. It was gone. When I walked out into the afternoon sun, the world felt different. Sharper. Quieter. The constant low-grade hum of anxiety that had been the soundtrack to my life for 10 years had been silenced. I drove home, and for the first time, I didn't scan the rooftops for snipers. That night, I slept for 8 straight hours without a single dream. When Mildred saw me the next morning, her eyes filled with tears. "Will," she whispered, her hand tracing the line of my jaw, "you look peaceful." I was. I had completed the mission. A few days later, I was cleaning out the basement. I found a dusty footlocker filled with my old army things. Inside was a framed photo of my squad, taken a week before the Fallujah op. 6 young men, myself included, grinning in the Iraqi sun. David was right next to me, his arms slung over my shoulder. I looked at his face, at his gap-toothed smile, and I felt the familiar pang of grief, the deep, sorrowful ache of his loss. But when I tried to remember the rooftop, there was just a blank, a clean, white, empty space in my mind. The procedure had worked. The data was there. I knew he had died, but the pain of the event was gone. I put the photo back, a strange sense of unease beginning to cloud my newfound peace.
The peace was a mirage. The quiet was a lie. The contextual degradation began subtly. I was telling Lillian a story about basic training, a funny anecdote about David switching the salt and sugar in the mess hall. Halfway through, I stopped. I couldn't remember the punchline. The memory just ended. I saw David holding the sugar shaker, a mischievous glint in his eye, and then nothing. I covered my confusion with a cough and changed the subject, but a cold dread began to seep into the hollow space in my mind. A week later, I took out the squad photo again. I looked at the faces of the other men I'd lived and fought with for over a year, and I couldn't remember their names. I could recall their call signs, preacher, doc, but their actual names, the ones their mothers had given them, were gone. It was like looking at a redacted document, the essential information blacked out. The decay accelerated. It was no longer just about the war. I tried to recall the fishing trip David and I had taken the summer before we deployed. I could remember the fact that we went, but I couldn't remember the feel of the sun on my face, the sound of his laughter as I lost a big one, the taste of the warm beer we drank. The memories were being stripped of their texture, their life, leaving behind only dry skeletal fats. The grief was still there, a constant phantom ache for my friend, but the man himself was being erased. The procedure hadn't just removed memory, it was a cancer, a slow-acting acid eating away at the past, and it had just reached the main artery. Panic is a loud, screaming thing. This was not that. This was a quiet, cold certainty, the kind you get when you're looking at a map and realize you've led your squad into a kill box. I pulled out the photo again that night. A single picture of just me and David, taken at my wedding. The photo in my hand was an execution order. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark of the living room, the faded photo on the coffee table, and I tried to remember him. I fought to hold on. I pictured his face, but it was like trying to hold smoke in my fist. The harder I squeezed, the faster it slipped through my fingers. I could remember the fact of his gap-toothed grin, but I couldn't see it anymore. The sorrow was real, a physical weight in my chest, but its source was now a blank page. The clinic hadn't removed the pain, it had just stolen the reason for it. By morning, I knew what I had to do. Another one-man op.
I drove back to the clinic, the suburban streets looking unreal, like a set for a movie I was no longer in. I walked into that lemon and circuit board scented waiting room, and the doctor must have seen something in my eyes because his sterile smile faltered for a half second. I didn't shout, I didn't threaten. My voice was low, steady, a field report. "It's not just the memory," I said, my words flat and dead in the quiet room. "It's him. It's taking all of him." The doctor steepled his fingers, his expression one of professional concern. It was a mask, just like the ones I used to wear. "Ah," he said, nodding slowly. "A rare complication. We call it contextual degradation. The primary exogen was successful, but the surrounding neural pathways are unstable. It creates a vacuum, and the brain, in its attempt to rationalize the emotional echo, begins to prune related, non-essential data. Non-essential data. He was talking about my best friend. How do I stop it? I asked. "We can't reverse it," he said, his tone gentle, like he was delivering bad news about a fender bender. "But we can contain it. We can finalize the process. Our deep cleanse protocol. It smooths the affected neural architecture, fully integrating the absence. It will quiet the emotional echo permanently. It will give you the peace you came here for." He was offering to burn the whole forest down to stop the fire in one tree. He was offering to solve the problem of the phantom limb by cutting off the whole torso. And I looked at him, at his clean suit, and I saw the hollow space where David used to be, and I knew I had no choice. The grief was a wild animal clawing at the inside of my chest. I had to make it stop. For Mildred, for Lillian. I had to go back into the wire. "Do it," I said. The chair was the same. The gentle hum was the same. I closed my eyes and focused on my mission objective. Endure. Survive. Get back to my family. For a moment, it worked. A profound sense of peace washed over me. The weight in my chest, that crushing sorrow for a man I could no longer picture, began to dissolve. The ghost was leaving the machine. But the feeling didn't stop. The lightness kept spreading, becoming thinner, emptier. It was no longer the absence of pain, but the absence of everything. I panicked and tried to grab hold of a memory. Mildred. I pictured her on our wedding day, her smile so bright it hurt to look at. But the image began to waver.
the edges fraying. The feeling, that overwhelming warmth of love, was draining away, leaving a flat, two-dimensional picture of a woman in a white dress. No, my body was paralyzed, but my mind was screaming. I tried to fight. I am Sergeant Will Miller. My service number is 348-921-117B. I live at 142 Oak Street. My daughter is Lillian Miller. Her birthday is June 12. I recited the facts. A soldier clinging to his rifle in a hurricane. But the words were becoming untethered from their meaning. 142 Oak Street was just an address with no connection to the feeling of home. Lillian, I could see her face, but the fierce, protective love of a father was evaporating like mist. It was the most gruesome amputation imaginable. Not of flesh and bone, but of soul. I could feel my life, my love, my very identity being meticulously, surgically, and painlessly extracted. I was a prisoner in my own skull, a silent witness to my own execution. The last thing to go was the grief. As it faded into the serene, silent static, I had one final, horrifying moment of clarity. That pain, that terrible and endless grief was the last piece of evidence I had that I was human. It was my anchor to the world. And then the machine cut the rope.
The hum stopped. The procedure was over. There was only silence. A perfect, clean, and total peace. Mildred found him in the waiting room. He was sitting in one of the comfortable chairs, staring at the glossy Aeternum brochure on the table, his posture perfectly relaxed. She had been calling his phone for hours, a knot of cold dread tightening in her stomach with every unanswered ring. When she saw him, a wave of relief washed over her, so powerful it made her dizzy. "Will?" She breathed, rushing over to him. "My God, I was so worried. What are you doing here?" He looked up from the brochure. His eyes, the eyes she had known for 30 years, met hers. They were clear, calm. The haunted, faraway look that had been her constant companion for a decade was gone, but so was everything else. There was no recognition, no flicker of love or anger or even annoyance. It was the polite, mildly curious look you would give a stranger who had mistaken you for someone else. "Well?" she said again, her voice trembling as she reached out and touched his arm. He glanced down at her hand on his sleeve, then back up at her face. He didn't pull away. He didn't do anything. He just waited, placid and patient, for her to speak again. The silence stretched, filled only by the whisper of the air conditioner. The doctor emerged from the inner office, his sterile smile firmly in place. "Mrs. Miller, I'm so glad you're here. We were just finishing up. The follow-up procedure was a complete success. All residual emotional dissonance has been resolved." Mildred stared at him, then back at the empty face of her husband. Resolved. He had resolved Will. He had cured the disease by killing the patient. She would take him home. She would help him from the car, lead him into the house he no longer remembered, and sit him down at the table he helped build. Lillian would come home from school and hug a man who felt nothing. They would become the caretakers of a memory, the loving guardians of an empty shell. He had gone to war and survived, only to come home and march willingly into his own oblivion. He did it for them. A final, selfless act to stop the nightmares that haunted their family. He couldn't have known he would simply be trading one ghost for another. The man who sat before me now was the final, unrecorded casualty of the war. His soul lost not in a chaotic firefight in the Iraqi sun, but in the sterile, quiet peace of a suburban clinic that promised to set him free.
The horrors linger. Thank you so much for watching or listening. By liking and subscribing, you're helping me summon the next chilling tale from the shadows. Join our community of the brave and prepare for what's to come.